Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into On the Beat on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe, an exclusive show where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter or journalist every single week to talk about the topics swirling around our beloved Buffalo Bills. And boy, are there some topics that we can talk about this week between what happened last weekend, or I should say 2 days ago, and what's going to happen potentially this weekend. Got a great show lined up for you. But before we get into that, my name is Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired. That guy over there is John Fina, former Buffalo Bills offensive tackle for 10 years. You can find him on Twitter at John Fina. Do us a favor, please please subscribe, whatever platform you are consuming this vidcast on. Please do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you are ever needing our content in post, meaning in podcast form, you can always find it on any podcast platform out there. Just search Overreaction Buffalo. But today, I'm excited to have another very special guest who is a returning guest to the program. Buffalo Bills insider for WGRZ Channel 2 here in Buffalo and co-host of press coverage on Sirius XM Radio, and at this point, Vic, official friend of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Vic Carucci. Vic, how are you doing? And more importantly, do you have your Christmas shopping done yet?
Oh man, no, don't have it done. But I put a dent. I've put a dent into it. I have, and I am. I'm trying to stay out of all stores. I think this year. I think I'm going to achieve it. I didn't last year, but it's going to be a complete order from this laptop in front of me type of Christmas. Which
all
is
right.
okay.
Vic, what did you get me?
Oh, John, I got to surprise you, man. If I told you, it would ruin the surprise.
It's a little forward, don't
Just
you think?
think about last year, what you got last year.
Double it. Whatever you got last year, double it.
Triple it. Quadruple it.
Wow. Vic is generous tonight.
Oh,
I'm killing it.
I'm Santa.
Vic, it is great to have you on the show. We appreciate you coming back. Your insights are always just fantastic. And this is a great opportunity right here about mid-season to pick your brain. I think you've seen what the rest of us have seen, just kind of Buffalo Bills, who to thunk it, right? And where they were back in July and where we are now, and catching up with you and hearing your takes on particular players and coaching staff, and the season is really going to be a lot of fun. Unless you don't think so, then it'll just be a drag. But we appreciate you being here nonetheless.
I expect fun. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. With that, one of the questions we wanted to ask you kind of off the top was just what was your early preseason assessment of this team and thoughts on just kind of where they are now, where the Buffalo Bills are in a 44-42 shootout with the Los Angeles Rams, looking to go in against the Lions 2 weeks in a row, the national game of the year, and standing at 10-3. Curious what your thoughts were before the season started.
Yeah, I think we're going to say 3 games in a row that it was like the national game of the year for Kansas City. Not in a row because there was a bye. But piggybacking off of John's point about who would have thunk it, because I think it was more of that thought process, the thought versus fact, that through the offseason and before the preseason, training camp, whatever, I had as did I think many others, that modest sense of what this team would be, that they'd still be good, they'd still compete, still likely win the division, or at the very least be in the hunt for that to the very end. We know how that turned out, but in terms of what we expected, and again, I say we because I'm pretty sure I had a lot of company. It was going to be this, if not a full step back, maybe a half step back. Too many changes, it seemed, to think they could take steps forward, big ones, or to even think that they could hold serve as to what they were as a team in 2023. And I maintain that they still, if you still did the math based on what the production of a Stephon Diggs was, what the production of a Gabe Davis was, how well the O-line played in particular, having what had been its best season, I think, in 2023 of that particular group, and to make the changes that you made just in that area alone, then add the safety turnover and so forth. We know, people know what happened here. It was fair to think it would go backward, but it didn't. And not only did it not go backward, they very much looked to me like even in the aftermath of this Rams game and however disappointing it was for Bills fans to see all that offensive production go to waste, still a really good team, still a team with a shot to have the top seed in the AFC, and still a team that you could regard as good as any team in the NFL.
It's good.
Vic, you brought something up, right? And I think a lot of people had tempered expectations for the year, given the turnover, especially key positions, losing a lot of veterans, which begs the question, to what or combination of what do you attribute this revitalization, so to speak, or just the overall success?
The low-hanging fruit on that one, the easy answer, and maybe it'll sound a little lazy, is Josh. Josh Allen's performance elevates everything, and it had done so before this year, John, but I think we know it took another jump or two or three in terms of the way he has played. So that's and I don't know if I'd say that in the context of it masking shortcomings, but in some cases that happens too. But it seems like it's more than that because of the production. Because now when you saw 9 of their 10 wins come with 30-plus points being scored, and saw them on this 7-game win streak where 6 of those games were 30-plus points scored, and we know that they came up with 42 in this last one in a loss. And that has to be just more than your quarterback, even though it felt like he was this one-man incredible band against the Rams and making history again, as he's been doing all year. But then how they stepped up. Let's credit Brandon Beane for the personnel, the depth that was there. The rest of us on the outside can have our doubts. I don't think Beane bought one iota into that. I've never, and I can't tell you I had a conversation where he said, yeah, we might step back. I mean, at times in response to questions, and Brandon is a fairly, I consider him a pretty open guy, more so than a lot of people in those roles, right? That he gives you something, doesn't just give you pablum, and doesn't just give you GM speak, say, or coach speak. And I think there was a confidence that, there might be some holes and there might be some slippage, but he felt good about what he was putting together. Now, how good did he really feel about the receiving core? I think we got that answer with the trade for Amari Cooper. That because I think we were all, again, I keep saying we, a lot of us were saying that this receiving core is lacking that guy and is subpar in many ways, playing okay, but not great. Cooper comes into the picture and for the most part has changed that.
Would you say that although maybe Amari Cooper is not a true wide receiver one, but with this group, it sort of brings the level up of everyone and gives Joe Brady more of a palette to work with and work with Josh? Because that's how I see it. I don't see Amari Cooper as a Jamar Chase, right?
No.
But there's tenure, there's leadership, there's experience, but he also adds that chess piece to a fledgling group in the wide receiver room, so to speak.
You're spot on, John. And I think what you're saying, and you can speak to this as a player too, from the player perspective of what that kind of addition means. And you were part of Bill's teams that never stood pat, really, as much as you had your core, and that core was built before you arrived, and then you were part of the continued build. But in terms of the veterans that were there and how much they helped others, even if it wasn't great production, overwhelming production, just being there, just being in the meeting room, just being on the field, and doing the things that I think Cooper does to draw attention. He commands that, and that has definitely made a difference with others. But I will hasten to add this. I did not see it coming with Khalil Shakir emerging the way he has. And if we're talking about the story of the receiver position, going back to the confidence that Bean had about moving on from some pieces there, it's, I guess, this belief that Shakir was going to do what he was going to do. I would have told you good, solid. It's been more than good, solid. He has established himself as one of the better slot guys in the game. And I think as we watch how offenses have evolved, think Patriots, Julian Edelman or Wes Welker before that, how important that slot guy is to, even if he's not the number one, but he helps transform what happens with others around him, including the tight ends.
That's great stuff.
You don't have to look any further than Cole Beasley. When Cole Beasley was removed from this offense, it changed dynamically, and it took us all of about 4 to 5 games to realize what was missing from the dynamic of the offense was somebody in that Cole Beasley role. Obviously, back then they brought in Jamison Crowder, who was injured, I think either in preseason or the first game of the season, and it just never amounted to anything. Looking back at just this game against the Rams, I don't feel normally we immediately kind of go to injuries and go right to the next week, but I feel like there's still some meat on the bone as it pertains to the Rams game, just because of the game that it was. I want to look at the post-game presser. Sean was very visibly off to me. There was a little bit of a shake in his voice. He was, in my opinion, noticeably upset. He said 2 things in that post-game presser that kind of struck a chord with me. One was the lack of urgency, which was there, but he immediately went to the offense. There was we didn't come out with the urgency we had wanted on offense. There was a 3 and out, but it was helped out by the roughing the passer. But we weren't successful, which was odd to me that we didn't start with urgency and then he went to the offense when it was the whole team that was kind of lacking that urgency. And then later in that press conference, he also said, "I wish we would have run the ball more in a shootout game." And then obviously Monday comes and he's way more Sean McDermott. Cool, calm, has kind of digested it. I'm just wondering, you've done this a long time, Vic. Some of your takeaways, some of the things that you felt like you picked up on between those 2 pressers.
Well, you picked up on a lot of things I saw, and I'll add, for whatever this is worth, I think it was more than an hour wait before he showed up for this press conference. And not that anyone cares, including perhaps you guys, but it was a late game from an East Coast standpoint, and media deadlines being what they are, and writers and broadcasters trying to do their jobs after the game. Of course, it's essential to hear the head coach's 2 cents on after any game, but particularly where there were a lot of questions to answer. And his late arrival just added to your observations of the guy being a bit off in the way he was approaching it. Yeah, he had every reason to be upset with the nature of the loss. He knew very well there would be a lot of second guessing about the handling of that last sequence and the timeout that was called before the touchdown, the second attempt and successful one, tush push with Josh Allen.
Right.
And then essentially leaving the game in the hands of the very low, incredibly low percentage of an onside kick. And we know that didn't work. The run thing that you mentioned struck me as well, that he was clearly, Joe Brady got a piece of Sean McDermott's wrath, or at least the questions, uncomfortable ones about that. You also know that Sean, I'm sure, got some uncomfortable questions from the guy who signs his paychecks, Terry Pagula. And that's, I'm going to just suppose, I don't know this for a fact, contributed to this lengthy delay before he shows up to talk with reporters. It's just par for the course. He always does. They do this autopsy, sort of immediate autopsy after the game. And he was probably right in saying that you could look at multiple ways about the clock management thing. And, had they not called that timeout, had they hurried after the first failed attempt and got to the line and tried to get it, how well is that working out? Well, it's chance versus no chance. We got to look at that. But how big of a chance? Okay, who knows? So, as far as the chance to win it. Secondly, I think the fact that he didn't, and I think this is where you were going, Joe, didn't mention the defensive failing, and I thought that was number one on my list of problems. That not only, if you look at it in the whole sense of the game, they were not good against the run. They were physically handled at the line of scrimmage defensively when the Rams got 94 yards in the first half of their 137. Two, you have that opening up, and then they're playing zone coverage most of the way. Those gaps that Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp with the surgeon back there, Matthew Stafford, just boom, 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 and the defense not getting off the field because they just kept giving up these gains. So I would say that was a problem. And yes, you want to criticize maybe some of the run of the. I'm not sure that I could utter one critical offensive comment after a game in which my quarterback made history with what he did. And, 6 touchdowns, 3 passing, 3 running. That performance and what he has done each almost weekly, but certainly in consecutive games where he's throwing a pass to himself, essentially, for a touchdown. We're talking, I'm sorry, I'm going to invoke some names here. Jim Brown.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to Lawrence Taylor. I'm going to talk about guys who tilt the field by themselves. He's playing that kind of football. He really is. And yes, other great quarterbacks are playing today. In obviously Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow put up more sick numbers against the Cowboys, and he's been putting up sick numbers all year. Lamar Jackson is freakish in his own way. But nobody does what this guy can do. Nobody. And I think we all recognize that. And no, there's not the pelt on the wall, that championship that would help reinforce, I guess, his stature. I'm a voter for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The measure of how you cast those votes, the standard is greatness. It's not the Hall of Very Good.
Right.
He's great. He's great, and he keeps raising the bar.
I want to interject something here, addressing why Sean McDermott didn't address the defensive failures in the game. So Vic Carucci has a Thanksgiving celebration, and 10 or 12 people show up, right? The last thing you want to talk about is politics, because it's going to turn into a 5-alarm fire, right? So I think that if Sean McDermott went down the road, even opened up the discussion of defense, he probably would have got himself into some trouble. Don't even broach the subject, because he probably would not have been able to contain himself. He might have been baited a little bit. He would have been short. He would have been curt, and it would not have represented very well at all. That's my belief. I don't want to talk about it if everybody's going to freak out.
Well,
John, we're bad.
No, John, it's more than fair. And I do, you said might have been baited. I mean, yeah, I think that the people asking questions after that game, not only a little cranky about how long they waited for the guy to show up in that media room in LA, but yeah, I think there would have been there definitely would have been questions about what happened defensively and how it all went wrong. I think he slightly broached it, but fingers were pointed in the direction of, as Joe mentioned, needed to run the ball. By the way, I don't disagree with him. I think maybe that would, if there's a flaw in what has otherwise been some really solid to excellent work by Joe Brady, that commitment to run maybe isn't as strong as I think it should be or needs to be. Secondly, there was the layups of got a punt, block, scoop, and score.
Yep.
And he initiated that. Sean did that. There were 9 players on the field for that final play, that Ram punt, where the attempt to block it was clearly compromised by that.
Yeah, it was funny because, and we don't have to talk about it, but even in the Monday presser when he was asked, I can't remember. I think it might have been Alex Brasky when he said, if you had to do that over, would you have coverage and catch the punt? And he was like, if I had to do over, we'd do that whole play over. And I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
On the defense, and it's kind of a two-part question, but I'll give it to you because they kind of correspond. Do you feel like we possibly either rushed Matt Milano back into this defense and aren't sprinkling enough Dorian Williams? Because I feel John feels like it, Jerry feels like it, and I think I'm there too, that Dorian probably could have had a little bit more of an impact in that football game, particularly with his speed and just some other stuff. And obviously Milano kind of coming in, not rusty, but you know what I'm saying. And then the other one is Phillips and Carter. Jordan Phillips, there's something different about that defensive line when Jordan Phillips is subbing in and out of it versus when he's not on the field or not in uniform. I don't even remember Dwayne Carter's number being called or his name being called, but do you feel like that those two players could have made a bit of a difference in this game?
It's an interesting point. Let's talk about Milano for a second. I think very hard when you've got the All-Pro, when you've got this mainstay of your defense back in the lineup, very hard to decide, okay, let's minimize, let's put a pitch count here. I mean, based on if the medical part of it is he can play and he's fine and full go and full confidence and I can only assume that that's the advice you got to take. It's not, I mean, Matt can tell you how he's feeling and how that, how it's going there with his biceps injury. And of course there's a leg injury that he was recovering from as well. But yeah, I do agree that Dorian is especially against the run, physical player, active player. Does he have Milano's instincts? Does he have Milano's got this sixth sense, I think, about, we know, right, that where to be to separate the ball carrier from the ball.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen it too often. We haven't seen it quite yet now and that he's been back, but I felt he was in the teeth of a lot of things there. I also felt that collectively, I'm not sure who was stopping this defense. Now, to your other point about Phillips, yeah, there's a lot of energy that he brings and skill. There's a reason why he was available at this point, though.
Sure.
I don't think we're not talking about an All-Pro there at his position. We are talking good player, sometimes slightly above that. But I think his ceiling is a healthy and fully recovered and less rusty Matt Milano, by comparison. And I know we're comparing two different positions, but you asked me about him versus Dwayne Carter.
Yeah.
I saw Carter. I was a big fan of Carter. I mean, from when he was drafted. And I thought I was seeing before his injury, boom, the traction that was going.
Yes.
Now, maybe there is yes, you didn't feel like I noticed him as much in that Ram game. And maybe that is part of the recovery. Who knows? Yeah,
gotcha. John, question before I ask another one?
No, I like the idea of Dorian Williams coming in a little bit more, but I don't think that Matt Milano's play warrants that. I think Matt's playing pretty damn well. I don't have any concerns with Matt Milano's play, but again, as Joe mentioned, the inside two, we're not particularly good, especially against the run, and the front four, we didn't get any pressure in that game. And to give Stafford and the Rams the credit they're due, they moved the pocket quite a bit. They chipped quite a bit as well on the ends, and they got the ball out quickly. So, they wanted to stress our zone coverage, and they did a hell of a job. They had a very good plan.
Yeah,
Matt Stafford threw some balls that probably should never have been caught, but were, and they played out of their heads.
They did. No, it was well caught. Sean McVay, good coach.
Oh, yeah.
Last I checked, and that team as a whole, pretty well coached and having we can't. I don't know that we can estimate the impact of we can't of a healthy now Puka Nacua, a healthy now Cooper Kupp. They weren't that, on the way to 6-6, which they were before the game, the Rams, they didn't have the full complement of those guys.
No.
And now you saw it. And like you said, a throw, I mean, that Nakua catch, I'm still trying to how did he do it? But he did it. That's an amazing talent. And then using him on jet sweeps, and he gets a touchdown run. That's not only a skillful receiver, incredible route runner, great hands, but he's also, a beast. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to go down easy on tackles. He's busting his way through. You can't say that about a lot of receivers on jet sweeps.
Yeah, it's true. Having a great conversation here on the beat with Vic Carucci. So let's press forward, because we've only got a couple minutes left with you.
Sure.
Let's press forward into this Lions game, which you go from one knockdown drag out fight that I feel like some of us were kind of expecting, to your point about those guys getting healthy. We talked about it on the Hump Day Hotline last week. Watch this be the game that the Rams offense wakes up, and sure enough, they do. And you go from the frying pan into the furnace with the Lions. I mean, what are they working on right now? Because you go from that offense to this offense, and they've got a better defense, I think, than the Rams do.
Yeah. Well, I think if there's anything to look at, the matchup in and of itself appears to be better team playing at home versus maybe not quite. They're not a worse team. I'd never describe the Bills as that, but maybe slightly not as good on the head-to-head matchup. That's what it looks like, big picture. I'm not so sure that's accurate, by the way, because first of all, yes, where do the Lions pose their biggest problems? Their offense and the completeness of it, the dominance of it. They're not weak anywhere, and their O-line can in fact, if Sean was worried about being dominated at the line of scrimmage in that game, and that the Bills' defensive line didn't do its part. Wow, wait do you see what's coming Sunday, because this Lions team's got that. And then behind that is David Montgomery, and then Jahmyr Gibbs, and how those guys run. And Montgomery, power, slasher, Gibbs, speedster, open field. They could take it long and go the distance on one play. This could look like Derrick Henry first play versus Baltimore type of game. And then, Jared Goff, really good. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, pretty good. I mean, just keep going. Laporta, Sam Laporta. Whew, there's a lot. But I looked at the depth chart yesterday, the Lions defensive depth chart. 12 guys are on IR. They're not all starters, but they got a lot of guys on IR. And then on top of that is the starters. There's either questionables or outs based on their previous game. So let's see how healthy they are. And of course they've had some time now. A little additional time, right, to recover, because they played
extra 2 or 3 days.
Extra 2 or 3 days. So that's gonna play to their advantage. But there's some significant defensive injuries. So would I expect another big Bills offensive game? Of course. How can you not? How you don't go into any game thinking, this will be the one where Josh is kind of okay. Even when he doesn't have great passing numbers, as we saw against San Francisco, he still could do spectacular things. And I would think that this will be that. This is how they've got to offset what that Lion offense brings.
Yeah, I would add to that, Vic. The running game, I understand why they went away from it in the Rams, and sometimes you get into those perpetuations in a game where, oh my God, we haven't run the ball, but now can we run the ball? So you throw it, and Josh is on a roll, so you throw it. I think what we have to look back at that game in particular was the time of possession where the Bills just got mollywopped, right? I mean, a full 17 minutes of the game was on the Rams side of the ball. So I would say, given what you talked about with the defense of Detroit, we have really got to hit the running game in a more varied approach. We cannot just go between the tackles all the time. We really got to expand that group and see if we can stretch them and find some holes out in the C and D gaps. And if we can do that, maintain a little more time of possession, I think it bodes well, not just for play action, but for the running game in and of itself.
Yeah, and I want to add, from a health standpoint, can Dalton Kincaid come back from this one? He on Friday of last week, he did not have the red "Don't Touch Me" jersey on, but Keon Coleman did. But it turned out that both were scratches. Does one of them come back? Could they both come back? We'll see. Coleman, I think obviously that was we can assume it was a reasonably significant wrist injury that's taken some time to heal here. But Taron Johnson, what will his status tomorrow? Tomorrow is going to tell us a lot about that. And if you don't have him in there against an offense this good, I worry a lot. That's a significant.
And Douglas too, right?
I'm sorry, Rasul, can't leave out Rasul Douglas from that list as well, even though he wasn't having his best day, because when they weren't leaving these openings in the secondary, they were getting some flags, and Douglas was the primary culprit.
Yeah. One last question for you, but before we get to that, Vic, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find your content, where they can hear all your stuff and all that good information?
Sure. Of course, I post links on my X account at Vic Carucci. On Facebook as well. I pretty much only use social for to link up, to give those links from both the video perspective of what we do at WGRZ and then my written content. I generally write an advanced piece before each game. I break each column into fifths, and then we'll do the follow up from the game itself. And then Sirius XM NFL Radio, I'll be on 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Saturday, and with my wonderful co-host Dan Leverfeld, who's in New York. He writes about the Jets. Man, as he had some stuff to deal with that club. But anyway, we have a lot of fun. He and I have been on the air with Sirius for 20 years.
Long time.
And it's been a long time, but a great run.
Yeah, you guys did a little bit of a role reversal on the expectations for the season.
Right.
We didn't have a lot of time, but how delicious is the Jets and the Dolphins?
Oh my God. It's something. And every week it's just listening to Aaron Rodgers, do his weekly appearance with Pat McAfee, and it's always a trip because I feel like buckle up because this ride can go anywhere.
Today was drones. Today was drones over New Jersey, right?
And I'm waiting, for. I don't think the Netflix thing has come out yet.
Not
right?
yet, like next week.
My wife and I were talking about that the other day. It's like we can't wait. We got to watch it.
Yeah. So one last question for you, and you talked about Dalton Kincaid and even Keon Coleman potentially returning. Keon, I think, is a little more kind of obvious what his return means. Dalton Kincaid to me is interesting because he's clearly one of the smoothest pass catchers on this team, as far probably outside of Amari Cooper and Shakir as well. But there's a rhythm to the way that he plays. But it feels like there's I don't even know, we don't know who we want to be mentality when him and Dawson are both healthy, and when Dawson's the only one there, when there's a void of Dalton Kincaid, Dawson seems to thrive, and Josh seems to know where he is, how to find him, and how to get him the football. Do you have any thoughts on what's going on in that situation and how they can find some?
That's interesting. No, Joe, that's a great point, because I don't feel like the tight end game as we see it applied by some other teams. Obviously, the most obvious example would be Kansas City. And it isn't obviously just Travis Kelce. It's the way their other tight ends work, running very similar routes, right? And it fits the system, and it looks like they have that down. Sam Laporta and the Lions, we're going to see that it again fits pretty well. Cincinnati, the way they've made use of tight end. I think there's multiple teams that Cleveland, actually. I mean, teams that aren't necessarily going to be playoff teams, but you feel like it's baked in and incorporated nicely. There is this odd juxtaposition of the two. And I thought this year was going to be so much more about Dalton Kincaid emerging in more definitively the role of like Kelce, I didn't say B Kelsey, and that's because you know that's blasphemy. You don't say that about a guy going into year 2.
Right.
But toward the end of his rookie year, you could see those signs, and you've seen moments, but there have only been moments. And his injury now, or and being out, has tripped that up, has disrupted that. Is he going to come back when he does and smoothly run this thing? And are they going to smoothly work it? I don't know. I still think it's more, fits and starts with where you see him working. And then with Dawson Knox as well, how does it flow with him? But you're right. He picked up the slack, not bad this last game, and even better against San Francisco. And it's important. I do think in light of how this everybody eats mentality of the receiving core works out, the tight ends have to be at that dinner table with forks and knives.
Yeah, I have a slightly different take on that, and it's my opinion that with the big turnover we had in the wide receiver room, there are a lot of moving parts to put back together. This is a big jigsaw puzzle, and I think there was a big focus on having the wide receiver room really understand their roles, understand the philosophy and the plays. And I don't think that Dalton Kincaid got forgotten in it. I think that this is Joe Brady evolving in front of our eyes. I think he's still a terrific player. He's going to come back. I think he will be a more featured part of this offense, whether it's the back half of this year or certainly in the future. But I love the kid. He was a great pick. Of course, I love the fact that we're getting these West Coast kids that I got to see through college. Like when we picked Shakir, I was ecstatic, and everybody's like, "Who is this guy?" And I'm like, wait, your mind will be blown. Because Vic, out here in the West, you saw Josh Allen on at midnight.
Right.
Khalil Shakir, his game was on at midnight.
Sure.
You guys were asleep. You were already into your hangover by the time we were just watching the Mountain West play football. So I know these guys. I know Utah. I know Wyoming. Yeah. I know Boise State. So I'm just loving that the West Coast guys are on my beloved Buffalo Bills.
And you are right about that. It's and that term East Coast biased or whatever comes into play because so much, especially when it applies to like Heisman voting and all those different things, because a lot of those now the more studious and dedicated voters take the time to find a way to watch what they missed. And there is technology, by the way, that lets you do that. But to your point, I definitely, it was hard to not know what Josh was about just because that was a quarterback centric draft for the Bills, and you had to really download on who they were. But the average person wasn't all that keen on the idea, like this guy from Wyoming who was inaccurate in college, like really, that's the guy they really want? No.
I was one of those guys.
I was not. Yeah.
So Vic, thank you so much for joining us. We always appreciate having you on. We had Howard Simon on last week. And I think we got Mike Catalana on next week. And I kind of made a joke to Howard that if the Buffalo Bills win the Super Bowl, we got to have the three of you guys on with us, like all of us on together, because you guys have been covering this team for so long and you've all been through it with them, and it would just be amazing. But thank you so much for lending your knowledge, everything that you know, your voice, and just your insight on this team. So appreciate you more than you know.
My pleasure. Always great to be with you guys and drinking in the knowledge that you present as well. Believe me,
it's that guy. I've learned so much from this guy, Jerry. It's not even funny. That's so good.
Yeah, don't boost his ego.
That's fair, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into On the Beat on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, powered by Believe. So good to have every single one of you joining us. On the way out, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. But for me, for John, for Jerry, for Howard, for all of us here, for Vic, I just said Howard, so now it's on the brain. For all of us here at Overreaction Sports
Network. It's the bald head.
We appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.